at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And if you ever forget the Second Amendment and can't remember it, tune in to Tall Tales at 4 o'clock, Monday through Friday. And your memory will be refreshed.
I was about to pencil in my Saturday. 4 o'clock, Bob?
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if we could be here on Saturday doing Tall Tales?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it would be nice. All right, let's turn straight to Zemi Ikotny. And today we're talking about flooding. I can't resist the opportunity to say that today the Daily News is all wet. Our View used portion of $6 million in federal funding to address flooding problems. Those of us on Guam are all too familiar with the power and destructive capabilities of Mother Nature. That's why most of the island lives in steel-reinforced concrete homes, and power lines are strung on concrete utility poles. It's why water wells and many businesses have backup generators. It's also the reason GovGuam always needs to be prepared for the worst. That sentence doesn't quite read right. GovGuam needs to be prepared for the worst? GovGuam is the worst. What? Beep, beep. Yeah, there you go. GovGuam will get a little help to do that thanks to another $6 million that will make its way to government coffers after President Joe Biden approved more than $3.6 billion to increase America's resilience to the impacts of climate change nationwide. FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Grant Program allows for innovative mitigation projects that address natural disasters with an emphasis on collaboration between governments, the private sector, non-governmental entities, according to an Adeloop news release. The Office of the Governor said the money can be used towards prioritizing mitigation needs. While we continue to battle the Wuhan virus global pandemic, we cannot forget the climate crisis that persists, especially for island communities like Guam, said Governor Leon Guerrero. Our island has weathered some of the most intense typhoons in the world, and typhoons in the region remain a threat most of the year. The governor added, "We welcome this commitment, and we look forward to investing these federal dollars into projects that build upon our island's resiliency." The administration has prioritized initiatives that preserve natural resources and build a more sustainable island, Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio said. The Daily News said, "We urge the governor's office to share those initiatives, along with details on how the $6 million and federal funds will be spent and exactly how that spending meets the criteria of innovative mitigation projects that address natural disasters. Given the heavy rains and subsequent flooding Guam has experienced lately, we urge the governor's office to commit a good portion of the money to flood mitigation projects. Steps must be taken to finally address the chronic flooding we see after heavy rains. It would be an excellent investment in disaster mitigation. But the governor's not going to tell you how she's going to use that $6 million. It's her $6 million. It's not the legislature's, right? And nobody is the boss of her when it comes to that money coming from the feds. Even if you meet her in a closed-door meeting, she won't tell you squat about it. All right. Well, okay, Daily News, you filled the news hole.
Are you sure Speaker Terlahi didn't write that second to last paragraph?
We urge the governor's office to yeah.
Is this not a press release?
Yeah, no, it's not. And it wasn't Jim Moylan either. Post. Here's what the Post says. Oh, the Post has got a barn burner of an editorial today. Fasten your seatbelts. This is really exciting. First day of school raises the stakes for all of us to help keep students safe. Today, about 92% of the nearly 30,000, is my mic working right? Seems to be fading in and out. Do you notice it?
It's working right now.
Yeah.
There was a little bump.
Okay. 30,000 of Guam's public school children will be going back to in-person classrooms, and they will be more vulnerable than the 104,797 Guamanians who have been fully vaccinated against the virus that causes Wuhan virus. Many of them cannot get immunized against the Wuhan virus because they fall outside the eligibility age of 12 or older. Even when families would like to get their students immunized, there's no way to do it just yet. There's still no solid date when emergency use Wuhan virus vaccination for children 11 or younger will be authorized by the Food and Drug Administration. You know, there's so much out there about vaccinations, the virus, children, immunity, susceptibility, fatality. And everything that I read suggests that it's not only not necessary to vaccinate children, it may even be dangerous or counterproductive.
But that doesn't fit the narrative, Bob.
It doesn't indeed, yeah. There's one going on around the internet. You've probably seen it, where a guy is speaking to a meeting. I can't remember. He's a doctor and a scientist.
Oh, yeah, I saw that at a town meeting.
Yeah, and he says, you know, the only thing the vaccination does for you is it lessens the effect of the disease. You can still pass it on, and it's never going to be like smallpox. We'll never get to a day when we say there's no coronavirus because it hides out in animals.
It's like the flu.
Yeah, or the common cold. You know, if we could cure it, we would have cured the common cold literally 100 years ago. So the vaccinations are not the salvation of everyone. The fact that you got a vaccination doesn't mean you can't die from the Wuhan virus.
Or spread it.
Or spread it to somebody else. The most vulnerable people are the most valuable people in society, the older folks. Especially like up over 80, those are by far the most valuable people in the island.
And you've just reached the threshold.
I have. And those old folks with what are called comorbidities. That sounds like something you'd go to college with, right? A comorbidity.
At least a laundry basket full.
Yeah. Sir, excuse me, could I buy a couple of comorbidities here? So, you know, people who are overweight, diabetics, people with heart problems, especially like heart failure, things like this, these are the people that are most vulnerable. And they're the ones that need the vaccination. And they're the ones that really need to be careful about where they go and what they do. But kids under 12, Probably not. The risk of somebody under 12 of dying of Wuhan virus is much less than the risk of dying because you got struck by lightning. Yeah. But as you say, we got to keep the narrative going. Certainly the Post is going to do that. Even when families would like, as you were. So one way to protect the school children, according to Governor Lou Leon Guerrero in a press conference Wednesday, is to surround them with people who are fully immunized.
What the?
Yeah, because they can't spread the virus. Wrong.
Should they hug them?
Yeah, surround them. Yeah. So it's kind of like the huddle in a football game, where the old-fashioned circular huddle.
Like a little wall?
Yeah, and the kid would be in there, and all of the people that are surrounding the child would have to kind of march in step or something so that they could keep that wall around the child no matter where he went.
In rugby, that's called a scrum.
A scrum, okay. The judiciary of Guam has followed suit with mandatory Wuhan virus immunization. The only branch of the government that has yet to implement mandatory vaccination is the legislature. Maybe they know something that the other guys don't know. It's time for senators to step up to the plate. When their branch of government is the only holdout, it speaks volumes about their care for the community, particularly for the most vulnerable. Yeah, the narrative. What we don't want is to go back to being restricted by pandemic lockdowns. But with the spike in the Wuhan virus area risk score now up around 8% from less than 1% weeks ago, and the arrival of Wuhan virus Delta variant on Guam, among other factors, the governor on Wednesday made it clear she will consider. No, she's not going to consider. She will not hesitate to impose restrictions such as social distancing and limiting the capacity in indoor establishments such as restaurants if the situation deteriorates. She will not hesitate. As a community, we need to be able to get the Wuhan virus infections under control by taking our individual responsibilities to heart. But so far, not everyone has taken the safeguards seriously. A wedding party, a karaoke get-together, and other recent events where people congregated have led to Wuhan virus clusters. Soon, if we're not careful, students will become part of Wuhan virus clusters through no fault of their own. There are still nearly 30,000 residents who are eligible to get vaccinated against Wuhan virus, but have not stepped up. Unless you have a medical exemption as per your doctor, why not get the life-saving shot? What if you have a religious exemption or objection? That doesn't count. It was said during the governor's press conference that the risk of getting severely ill from the fast-spreading Delta virus variant is extremely high among those who aren't fully immunized against Wuhan virus. We have a few thousand more senior citizens who are at higher risk of Wuhan virus infection who are not fully immunized. Some of them could be grandparents or great-grandparents or caregivers to some of the students. While it's true Wuhan virus vaccination is a choice, those around children too young to be immunized against Wuhan virus might want to think about their stance. What are the risks? Who ultimately reaps the rewards of full vaccination? The answer is all of us, the young, the old, and the immunocompromised alike. All right, well, the Post has weighed in. No blue, I'm saving on blue ink today. No blue stars today.
I'll give him a 10 for fear-mongering.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we got the card coming up, but I noticed that I have Julius Santos, back from yesterday. Welcome back, Julius.
Thanks. I appreciate the time again. You know, there are a few points there that you were discussing with respect to the article, and I'll start with the one that's really just kind of looming over my head is whoever's writing this is assuming to have control over my children and to assuming to you know, that their idea of safety for my children supersedes mine. That's one side of it. The other side of it is I agree with you. All the science, everything, all the research that I've read, and ever since the beginning of last year, they were telling us that the kids are the least susceptible to this, you know, the least likely and the most, in terms of their immune system, the most protected. And it's the whole cognitive dissonance thing. And you know, I when I talk about this with my friends and my family, I try not to devalue the lives that were lost, because that's a tragedy. However, like what Jose just said before I called in, talking about fear-mongering, and I like to give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't even think they realize they're fear-mongering. They're so absorbed with their fear about the Wuhan virus that they're not actually listening to the science. They're cherry-picking from the science what they want to back up their statements. It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating because people can't live their lives the way they want to anymore because of this government fiat.
Yeah, well, you know, there are people over on the hard right that would tell you that this whole Wuhan virus is just one step towards leftist totalitarianism. If they can tell you what to do with your kids, and all of the other social controls that they put in place, when there doesn't really seem to be good scientific reasoning behind it, you kind of got to ask, why are they doing all this stuff?
Yeah, no, and you know what, ever since last year when I first saw this, and especially because it came out of China, that was a major red flag for me. And I was telling my family, and you know, they were kind of like, oh, you're just, you know, you're overreacting, or you're seeing things that aren't there. But I mean, just the statement that the governor put out, and I don't know if she realized it herself, but to say that GPD will be enforcing, you know, the mask mandate, that's taking, I think, more than an inch towards totalitarianism. I'm trying to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, but they don't realize what they're doing here. And I remember listening to your show one time talking about getting the vaccine, and you used the my body, my choice argument. And I actually really like that. And maybe when it comes to the mask mandate, my body, my choice. Mm-hmm. And the way I see it is, with all due respect, you talked about a little bit earlier, you said 100 years ago, what did they do? And that was the flu pandemic of 1918, or the flu outbreak. And you know, so it's like we've had these things, the bubonic plague. We have Ebola that kills you within hours violently. We had the dengue scare just a couple of years ago, but for some reason this aggressive form of influenza, you know, everybody's scared to live their lives. And then we have this, I'm a strong, proud Chamorro, except for when it benefits me to be a suffering Chamorro.
Yeah.
You know, it's a contradiction, and it breaks my heart to hear that.
The suffering Chamorro part is hard to take, and it doesn't work. You know, there's a group here that have tried it over and over again, and the proud, competent, capable Chamorro is the one that's going to really get this stuff done for us.
They're the ones that start being called not Chamorro enough. And the weird thing about the suffering Chamorro and about this whole fear-mongering, it's the soft bigotry of low expectation of people being competent enough to live their lives, of people, you know, being healthy enough to go out into the world and not allowing their fear of catching the flu to incapacitate their ability to live their lives. And, you know, it's tragic because we're on such a small island. We've already seen, you know, what this flu is going to do to us. Again, as tragic as it was for those people to lose their lives, it's scary to see where this thing could go. You know?
You're absolutely right, Julius. I'm glad you called back in today. We'll be looking forward to talking to you again, okay?
Yes, I appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Just one thing, though. On Tall Tales, we don't give people the benefit of the doubt, right?
He's being nice.
Yeah, he's being nice. But yeah, and people use the phrase without completely understanding what it means. What it means is, your facts don't sound right to me, but I'll go along with you anyhow.
I gave him the benefit on day one. What year is it now? How many months have we been doing this?
And I use that, for 30 years, people gave Archbishop Apron, well, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. I heard this, but we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. And look where it got us, right?
$1 million later.
Yeah,
Millions.
a diocese later, right? Okay, let's turn to the card. And let's see. Today on the card, I've got Neil Weir versus Samoans, and I'm going to finish up the article that, or the subject I was doing yesterday, Oklahoma versus the First Amendment. And then I might finally get to the Pope versus Archbishop Bessieux, and Tall Tales versus Rapinoe. So let's start out with Neil Weir versus versus Samoans, which probably means that we'll be talking with repeat later on, right? Break time. Okay, let's take a short break.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Starting August 1st, pandemic unemployment assistance claimants must start searching for work to remain eligible for PUA benefits. 3 work searches a week are required. Work searches include registering on HireGuam.com, meeting with employers, submitting resumes and applications, and attending job fairs. Only a few are exempt from the work search requirement. This includes those working reduced hours, those in training programs, and self-employed individuals. Remember, PUA ends September the 4th. Now is the time. Let's rebuild our workforce. For more information, go to dol.guam.gov.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Okay, so here we go. This is Neil Weir versus Samoans. And as I go through this article, you'll think, wow, that reporter really wrote a comprehensive news story for PNC. That's what I thought till I got to the end of it, and I saw that it was an equally American release. In other words, once again, the PNC just took a press release and ran it as hard news.
Online it said, click here for the entire story. What story?
Yeah. and here's how it goes. After a divided panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit, translating Weir into English, it was a 2-1 decision. That's like saying that's like saying on the 31st of the month, right? I'm not even going to think about that until next month. Right? Yeah. Or one of the ones that I like to use a lot. I run into someone that I know on January 2nd, and I say, gee, how you doing? I haven't seen you since last year. After a divided panel, it's wow, a divided panel, huh? Yeah, one guy of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit ruled in June that there is no right to citizenship for people born in U.S. territories. Now, let's just stop and talk about citizenship for a moment, okay? The 14th Amendment, which was one of the 3 Civil War amendments, which was ratified on July 9, 1868, says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. So what that means is, for sure, if you were born in a state, you are a U.S. citizen. Now, some would read it like this: all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. And if they happen to live in a state, they're citizens of that state too. Yeah. But courts have never read it that way. And Weir has tried this before. Now, the reason that the 14th Amendment was passed was because of a guy named Roger B. Taney. I rather pronounce it Taney because it looks like Taney, but it's actually pronounced Taney. Roger Taney, in a decision called Dred Scott versus Sanford, one of the most well-known decisions the Supreme Court ever came down with, said that not only were slaves not citizens, but even African Americans who were freedmen were not citizens. So the 13th Amendment ended slavery in the United States. The 14th Amendment kind of filled in some of the gaps here. Citizenship, due process of law, etc. 15th Amendment provided for voting rights for people regardless of what color they were, unless they happened to live on Guam and are not Chamorro. Then it doesn't, yeah. But fortunately, the Ninth Circuit kind of stepped in on that one. So other than right here, in the amendments, you won't find the word citizen in the corpus, in the body of the U.S. Constitution, except for one place. And that says if you are going to be president of the United States, you must be a natural-born citizen of the United States, or a citizen of the United States before the Revolution. And there's been a lot of argument about what that means. What does a natural-born citizen mean? I have studied it, and I conclude it means being born in one of the 50 states. There's a good case law saying that whatever applies to the states also applies to D.C., so that would work also. So at the time, in the beginning, it meant being born in one of the 13 colonies. But we'll come back to that a little later on. That's the only place that the word citizen is used in the Constitution. There's no part of the Constitution until you get to the 14th Amendment that tells you how a person becomes a citizen. So how did that work? Well, it worked like this. The framers of the United States Constitution saw the world through lenses focused on English common law. So their thought processes involved the English common law, which you'd already been working on for 700 or 800 years by that time. So at English common law and in international law, there are two different ways of defining citizenship. One is called jus sanguinis. The other one is called jus soli. Jus soli means law of the blood. Jus sanguinis means law of the soil. I'm sorry, but backwards. Jus sanguinis means law of the blood. Jus soli means law of the soil. So some countries practice jus sanguinis. If you're Japanese, you could be born at the South Pole. It wouldn't make any difference. You're still Japanese. If you are an American, the law of jus sanguinis, as you were, soli applies. That means if you were born in the United States, you are a United States citizen. And it means not only in the 50 states, but anywhere where the U.S. exercises sovereign power, which means the territories subject to the laws of Congress. So if you're born on Guam, you are a natural-born citizen. If you're born in America and Samoa, you are not a natural-born citizen. If your mom and dad are natural-born citizens and they're stationed in Japan when you're born, you ain't a natural-born citizen. you are not a birthright citizen.
Not on the base or not off the base?
Doesn't make any difference.
What about embassies?
Doesn't matter.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because one of the first laws that the new Congress passed was called the Naturalization Act, and that covered Americans off overseas for one reason or another, and how they would become citizens, and in a just soli type fashion.
There's a tight-end tangent because you mentioned it yesterday. Your involvement with the McCain campaign.
Yeah.
How was that?
Well,
addressed?
he was born probably in the Canal Zone, so the Canal Zone is probably the outside fringe of just soli, right? Because the United States didn't exercise sovereignty over it; it had a perpetual lease over the Canal Zone, but it was not a U.S. territory. And I don't remember what the statute said about, but my suspicion is that the statute said birth in the Canal Zone counts.
You're talking about the Panama Canal Zone.
I am. I'm not talking about the Suez Canal. Yeah, right. Or the Corinth Canal.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, none of those. So, so that has been a hotly debated question. George Romney, a candidate for president, was born in Mexico. Yeah, his parents were missionaries. He was born in Mexico. He ran for president, etc. I hold that Ted Cruz, who's the kind of guy that I would vote for if I could vote, can't become president because he was born in Canada. His mother was a United States citizen, but he was born in Canada. So that question is one that people bat around, especially, if there's any suspicion that someone was born in Kenya instead of Hawaii. But I understand that after about the first 3 years of the Obama administration, the U.S. ambassador for Kenya to the United States said, I want to make it clear he was not born in our country. Yeah. And there's no easy way to tell because states don't have requirements that say you got to be a native-born citizen, et cetera. So if that is ever going to be sorted out, it would be sorted out on January 6th before a joint session of Congress, just like the Trump presidential election was about to be challenged till an undisciplined, irresponsible mob broke into the Capitol. We could have perhaps gotten into these kinds of matters. But it's happened before. It happened in 1876 with Hayes and Tilden. Tilden had the most electoral votes, but not a majority. Hayes got to be president. So when it comes to citizenship, there isn't anything in the Constitution except this section in the Bill of Rights that said if you're born in a state, you are a citizen. Then there are statutes all over the place. So Neil Weir, wants to pick up on this and say there is no right to citizenship for people born in U.S. territories. Well, where would that right come from? It only comes from what I would call the weaker reading of the 14th Amendment. Not the stronger, but the weaker. And no court has, as far as I know, has ever embraced the weaker reading. So if you're not born in one of the states, then you got to look to the laws of Congress, because Congress said if you were born here or the descendant of someone going back to 1898, then you are a U.S. citizen. My wife was born here. She was not a citizen when she was born. She became a citizen in 1950. Happened to a lot of folks. So he goes on to say there's no right to citizenship. And this, of course, is meant the purpose of it. Well, that's not fair. That's kind of an Ann Hattori. The American flag flies here, so you'd think that American law applies. But it doesn't. There's a case called, on and on. There's no right to citizenship for people born in U.S. territories. Current and former elected officials from Puerto Rico, Guam, and the U.S. Virgin Islands and the Northern Mariana Islands, along with a diverse array of scholarships, the ACLU and the Virgin Islands Bar Association are calling for the 10th Circuit to rehear the case. And when I saw those four initials, that was it for me. ACLU. I used to really admire the ACLU. In fact, when I came back from law school, there was an ACLU chapter here. One of the first things I did was pony up $25 to join. But boy, they are so far off their mission that. Anyhow, Weir says, so if all of these people, all of these scholars, are asking for rehearing, I got to be right, right? Now, when he says rehearing, what he means is asking the 10th Circuit to rehear it en banc. Circuit courts have multiple judges. The largest circuit court is the 9th. There are probably something like over 30 judges in the 9th Circuit. And the way a panel is assigned to a particular case, it's by lot. Judges don't say, hey, that American Samoa case over there looks pretty good. Put me and Hank and Susie on the panel. We want to hear that. It doesn't work like that. It's just a random assignment. And because it is a random assignment and because there are many judges on the circuit court, and because of the randomness of the assignment of judges, there's a little bit of a crapshoot there. There is a mechanism where someone who does not prevail before a circuit court can petition for a rehearing en banc. And then not all of the judges, but like 11 of the judges will rehear the case and write their own decision. And oftentimes an en banc panel will reverse the first panel that heard it. You have a much better, and it's a matter of discretion. If you've petitioned the 10th Circuit, doesn't mean they got to grant your petition, but you got a whole lot better shot at getting a hearing en banc than you have on getting a day before the U.S. Supreme Court. And then Weir goes on to say, it says a lot about the importance of this case to have such broad support for rehearing by the full 10th Circuit. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. What it does, it tells you that the case is interesting enough to attract people who want to get a little earned media out of it, who want to flesh out their resumes a little bit, and who are willing to put a chip on the number 13 on the roulette wheel, because if that's where the wheel stops, they're going to win, and then they'll have bragging rights. You know, I filed an amicus brief for the 10th Circuit on that Samoa case, and the en banc panel reversed the decision. And I was on the winning side on that. It was probably my scholarship that did it. You know, that's what it says, Neil. He goes on to say, said Neil Weir, president and founder of Equally American, which advocates for equality and civil rights for 3.5 million residents of U.S. territories. Now, of that 3.5 million residents in U.S. territories, how many of them live in Puerto Rico? Well over 3 million. The rest of us are sort of like footnotes, because the real action is Puerto Rico. It's not us. So he goes on to say, their arguments really show what is at stake if the divided panel's decision is allowed to stand. Really shows what's at stake. The following amicus briefs were filed in support of rehearing en banc. Members of Congress, former members of Congress, and former governors of Guam. Well, former governors, we saw how gullible people were when Tina Rose Munya Barnes came along with her Resolution 56. And people, racism? Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'm in favor of that. I'm with you on that one, Tina, right? And I suppose the same kind of mechanism was working here. And then Virgin Islands Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, former governors Kenneth E. Mapp, yeah, John DeYoung, and former Congresswoman Donna M. Christensen. I wonder what her religion is. Her name is Christensen. Guam Congressional Delegate Michael F.Q. San Nicolas. Once again, a little gullibility there. Doesn't know what he's signing on for. Didn't listen to Amata Radawagan on my show, obviously. Former Governor Carl Gutierrez. Yeah, same thing. Puerto Rico, former governors Luis Fortuño, Anabel Acevedo Villar, and Dr. Pedro Rosselló. Northern Mariana Islands, former Governor Juan Babauta argues for rehearing because the divided 10th Circuit panel's decision creates a divisive two-tiered citizenship structure whereby individuals born in the 50 states are constitutionally entitled to birthright citizenship, while those born in the territories may receive citizenship only as a favor dispensed by Congress, capable of being withdrawn at will. No. And this, talk about fear-mongering, if Congress wanted to, all you guys that were born on Guam, you could loot. No. Citizenship Scholars argues for rehearing because the panel majority's decision rests on premises sharply at odds with the historical record. That's what they all say. Scholars of constitutional law and legal history argue for rehearing because in holding that the Citizenship Clause does not confer birthright citizenship on individuals born in America and Samoa, the panel majority relied extensively on the insular cases. Well, that's it then. Well, all you got to do, what you do is you have people sitting out in the gallery at the Supreme Court that have, maybe 2 by 3 foot signs that say, down with the insular cases. And when the argument starts, you lift that up and the 9 justices, oh, is that what this is about? We got this one covered. No problem. Yeah. Where was I here? Yeah, the panel majority relied extensively on the insular cases, which modern majority itself acknowledged as disreputable to modern eyes because of their racist and imperialist underpinnings. Imperialist for sure. If the country didn't turn to imperialism about that time, we wouldn't have to worry about American Samoa because probably the flag of Germany or Britain would be flying. It wouldn't be ours. And by the way, if it hadn't been for American imperialism, we would probably be looking at the rising sun when we got up in the morning. Because had America not been an imperialist nation, it would not have stuck the flag in the ground in the Philippines. Had that not happened, without going into all the details, when the French, Vichy France, after the Germans beat the French, when the Vichy French let the Japanese come into Vietnam for rubber and oil, that's when basically it was over. The United States froze Japanese assets, etc., pretty much sent strong signals that if anybody was paying attention, say, Japanese are not going to put up with this. This is going to be war. Well, had we not been an imperialist nation and taken the Philippines, that probably wouldn't have happened. All right, let's take a short break and we'll come back to that.
Hey, big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community. Get national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Mescla, read all about it. Check out Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tuman for lunch. Serving up some savory seafood specials such as spicy garlic shrimp, candied salmon, or better yet, the local favorite, snapper or shrimp escabeche, available only during lunch hours. Make sure to come down and try these tasty specials and more. Call 969-2652 for more info or to make a reservation. Located at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tuman, Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
So, yeah, the United States is an imperialist nation. And, you know, you can look back at history and you can always play the what ifs game. And you could always play the, well, we should have done this or should have done that, or the 16-19 game. But we are where we are, and we can't go back and change the past. The only thing we can have an effect on is the present and the future. And I make the case that the insular cases are the best friends that we in the territories have. And it's very popular to beat up on the insular cases, pull an Ann Hattori and say, because the people can't deal with Anglo-Saxon rules, therefore the Constitution doesn't have to apply. Just things that are just dead wrong. But a classic example of Robert Lynn's statement that it's easier to believe a lie you've heard 1,000 times than the truth or the fact that you just heard. And then the sentence goes on to say, which the Supreme Court has long said should not be given any further expansion. The Supreme Court said that once. Yeah. So who's expanding it? We're just applying it as it's always been applied. The American Civil Liberties Union and the ACLU of Utah. Now these Samoans that are plaintiffs in Weir's suit are all from Utah. All live in Utah, argues for rehearing because the insular cases cannot be repurposed to serve the aims of self-determination when they only reinforce congressional dominion over the territories. Wrong! Because the insular cases hold that the Constitution does not apply ex proprio vigere. They allow for self-determination. If those 5 territories were incorporated territories, that's it. No self-determination. And then the Virgin Islands Bar Association. Although this case seeks to vindicate the citizenship of American Samoans, allowing the panel decision to stand would call into question the foundation and durability of the citizenship of Americans born in the Virgin Islands and every American born in a U.S. territory. No. It sanctions a second-class statutory citizenship, little demagoguery here, that exists only at the whim of Congress, sending the unequivocal message to Virgin Islanders, Puerto Ricans, Guamanians, and Northern Mariana Islanders alike that their citizenship, a foundation principle of every American's identity, can be destroyed at any moment by a government unit in which they have no voting representation. Not true. The United States has also requested an extension of time to respond to plaintiff's petition for a hearing with the 10th Circuit ordering a response by the United States and interveners due by September 15. He doesn't mention who the interveners are. Well, I know a couple of the interveners is the government of American Samoa, There's Amata Raduagan. And you talk about demagoguery. You know, by gosh, we're going to give you citizenship whether you want it or not. So 2 words here to compare: kritarchy and democracy. Democracy. Demo means Greek word, 2 Greek syllables. Demo means people. Krasi means government by. Democracy. Government by the people. There's also a kritarcracy, right? Kritarch is a judge. It has biblical roots. It goes all the way back to the Old Testament. But kritarchy means government by judges. I don't make any secret of the fact that I don't like kritarchy anywhere near as much as I like democracy. The beauty of decisions made by a democratic body like a Congress or a legislature is that there's much more likelihood that people will buy in because it's they themselves or their representatives that make the decision. I give you the abortion decision, Roe versus Wade. Had that decision not come down, we wouldn't be fighting over it, because it's a matter that's supposed to be decided by state law. Some states want it, some states don't. You're not forced into anything. But when you have kritarchy, when you have rule by judges, that doesn't work very well. So if there's a choice, and judicial restraint is supposed to mean that justices and judges will give great weight to the decisions of democratic bodies and won't overturn them for slight reasons. So here we are, where the people in the government of American Samoa say, we want to stay like we are. We don't want this American citizenship. But Neil Weir invokes the doctrine of kritarchy to get the court, first the district court and now the 10th Circuit, to do something that the people don't want.
That's what I don't get.
Yeah.
That list of all the people who provided testimony, or animus, they call it.
Amicus. Yeah.
Any of them from Samoa?
No.
Hello?
Yeah, but there will be amicus briefs from Samoa and interveners from Samoa. And that's why, this guy is dangerous. He has no mandate. He's playing to the nickel seats, and he's dangerous because he's good at what he does. I'll give him that. I mean, he obviously understands how the press work, at least at PNC, because PNC is kind of his public relations organ. Okay, let's break for the big halftime show here.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Bound for the border. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The cabinet secretary, whose job it is to keep the country safe, headed south today.
DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is scheduled to travel to southern Texas to Brownsville, where he will meet with Border Patrol officials and receive an in-person briefing about continuing problems with migrants crossing illegally into the U.S. from Mexico. At least 210,000 crossed illegally in July alone. While in Brownsville, Mayorkas will also meet with local officials and take questions from reporters.
Fox's Evan Brown. The surge of migrants at the border surpassing the 1 million mark for the year. Arizona's Attorney General Mark Brnovich telling Fox News.
I think it's obviously clear that Joe Biden has been hijacked by the far left of the Democratic Party that wants to radically alter this country. So let's make no mistake about it. What is happening right now is not an accident. It's intentional.
California becoming the first state in the country to order all its school employees to get coronavirus vaccinations.
California Governor Gavin Newsom says all teachers and school staff, including administrators and custodial employees, must now be vaccinated or be tested weekly.
We think this is the right thing to do, and we think this is a sustainable way to keeping our schools open.
Newsom said while the Delta variant is top of mind in making this announcement, there are other variants to consider and may still be others, he said, in the future. California is already requiring all state employees and healthcare workers to be vaccinated.
Fox's Jessica Rosenthal. The school board in Loudoun County, Virginia, has passed a transgender student policy, which, among other things, requires teachers to use students' preferred pronouns. Jeff Morse, one of 2 board members who voted against it.
Our teachers are not monsters who pick on at-risk kids, and they don't need to be told to love their students. They already do.
America is listening to Fox News.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Starting August 1st, pandemic unemployment assistance claimants must start searching for work to remain eligible for PUA benefits. 3 work searches a week are required. Work searches include registering on HireGuam.com, meeting with employers, submitting resumes and applications, and attending job fairs. Only a few are exempt from the work search requirement. This includes those working reduced hours, those in training programs, and self-employed individuals. Remember, PUA ends September the 4th. Now is the time. Let's rebuild our workforce. For more information, go to dol.guam.gov.
News.
The Taliban continues to seize control of territory in Afghanistan. The CIA now estimating insurgents could overrun the capital within 90 days. But Pentagon spokesman John Kirby says there's no going back on the U.S. troop withdrawal.
The president has been very clear that we want to maintain a diplomatic presence in Afghanistan. We believe it's important to have that presence to continue to further the kinds of progress, social, political, and economic, that we've been able to help foster inside Afghanistan.
The White House insisting that Afghan forces have the ability to defend against the Taliban, but they also need the will to do so. Poised to become New York's first woman governor in less than 2 weeks, Andrew Cuomo's soon-to-be successor has spoken out about the coming transition.
Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul says this promotion was not expected, but
it's a day for which I am prepared.
She says she spoke with Governor Cuomo, thanking him for his service to the state, but in light of sexual harassment allegations against him, she addressed his resignation.
I believe it is appropriate and in the best interest of the state of New York.
Cuomo remains governor until August 24th. Then she says a new era will begin.
People will soon learn that my style is to listen first, then take decisive action.
And Lieutenant Governor Hochul says there will be a lot to act on. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Numbers that could factor into the 2020 midterm elections will be released today. The Census Bureau to publish the population data from the 2020 census that will be used to redraw the boundaries of congressional districts. The pandemic delayed some of the data's collection and its release. California man has been arrested for the spear gun deaths of his 2 young children. He has reportedly told the FBI he discovered the kids had inherited serpent DNA from their mother and would grow into monsters if he didn't kill them. Children's bodies were discovered in Mexico. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
You've got a job to do. Having the right equipment for the job is critical, and East West Rental has the exact tools you need. Get it done faster with the right stuff, whether it's landscaping tools, concrete tools, lifts, trucks, lights, generators, trench boxes, welders, tents, tables, and chairs. They're here to help you tackle any project you're working on, big or small. Open Monday to Saturday, 7 to 5, closed Sundays. Find what you're looking for at East West Rental Center in Upper Tumon or call 646-1463.
Here we go again. Another big halftime show on Tall Tales. That means we are now in the last half of Tall Tales on a Wednesday afternoon. And I've been talking about Neil Weir and citizenship for people in American Samoa. When Tina's Resolution 56 was on for public hearing, somebody who is knowledgeable about the Northern Marianas testified against it by pointing out that the Northern Marianas has a provision in their covenant that restricts land ownership to citizens of Northern Marianas descent. Amata Coleman Radewagen, who is the delegate to Congress from American Samoa, probably spent 25 minutes with us here on Tall Tales, telling us, that they're happy with the way things are. They're American nationals, which is where they want to be. They have set up a government that is perfectly suited to their culture, their wants and needs, and they don't want it to change. And if it's to change, then they think it should be changed by the people of Samoa and the U.S. Congress, not by a court sitting in Denver, of all places. And I couldn't agree with her more. She was very articulate. She laid it out so clearly that you'd wonder if anyone ever heard her could possibly disagree. But, of course, Neil Weir, talk about giving somebody the benefit of the doubt. I don't give him the benefit of anything at all. I think that he is engaged in something for motives that are not as pure as he would like you to think, and that the causes that he champions are actually, in many respects, counterproductive to the people he says that he's helping. For instance, the people in the territories. The genius of the insular cases, and some people will say, well, genius, we don't like the insular cases, is that it allows the Congress to tailor, in accordance with the wishes of the people that live there, a different system for each place. And Northern Marianas has their own setup. We have one of our own. Ours is much like the Virgin Islands. Samoa is different. Puerto Rico is different. All those islands are different, and the one size fits all would mean that one size would fit none. So Weir keeps on, and of course he's out fundraising. He needs the demagoguery to assist in his fundraising. My prediction is that the Ninth Circuit won't even, the 10th Circuit won't even grant his petition for rehearing. That's my analysis at this point. Okay, moving on from Neil Weir, let's go back to Oklahoma. And an article called, or as it were, an item on the card called Oklahoma versus the First Amendment. And this is a column by my favorite legal columnist, Jonathan Turley. And the title of the column is Better Sooner Than Later. Oklahoma coaches claim right to discipline players for unpopular viewpoints. Well, I can't resist the first sentence of the title, Better Sooner Than Later. I've got to talk a little bit about the word sooner. Oklahoma is called the Sooner State. Did you know that, Jose?
Isn't that the name of the football team?
Uh-huh. You know why they're called the Sooners?
You said yesterday, but I'd like to hear it again.
Okay, I don't think I mentioned it yesterday. I said I was going to talk about it someday. Yeah, all right. So when Oklahoma, during the territorial days of Oklahoma, it was decided that land would be made available to homesteaders. The United States had a little difficulty knowing exactly what to do with Oklahoma. For a long time, half of it was the Indian Territory. The other half was the territory of Oklahoma. So they decided that they would encourage homesteaders. So they had what was called a land rush. And there were places that people would assemble on the edges of land owned by the national government that would be available for homesteading. And at the appointed time, like 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, a cannon would go off and people would rush in to stake their claims on that land and set up their homesteads. Everybody except some folks who thought that they would rather do it sooner than the official start of the land rush.
Uh-huh.
And that's where the name Sooner came from, the Sooner State.
Sounds like an older version of the RISE program.
Yeah. Yeah, now we
have our own Sooners.
We have a good tailgater here who is in fact a Sooner. Dr. Tom Poole.
Oh, okay.
He is a Sooner. Yeah. So the title of the article: Better Sooner Than Later. Oklahoma coaches claim right to discipline players. And yesterday I talked about a volleyball player named Kylie McLaughlin, who had coaches named Walton, husband and wife, Lindsay and Kyle Walton. We could refer to them as the Waltons.
Good night, John Boy.
Yeah. And they kicked her off the varsity volleyball team. Not because she was a bad volleyball player, but because she was a conservative, and she said conservative things that made the other players uncomfortable. Yeah. And so Kylie brought suit. I'm sorry, not Kylie. Kylie McLaughlin brought suit. An interesting case developing in the University of Oklahoma on free speech on campus. After she was allegedly excluded from the team for expressive conservative or unpopular views. What is notable is that in the motion to dismiss, the Waltons bring a motion to dismiss the case, they're the defendants. They argue that they have a right, if not an obligation, to exclude players who are unpopular due to their views. Yeah, you're on my volleyball team, and if you say things, some of this really hate speech, like conservatives are always mumbling, like you're the sex you're born, you cannot change it, or a marriage is a man and a woman, or abortion is the killing of an innocent, helpless human being. If you say things like that, they not only have the right to kick you off the team, they may have an obligation to do it.
Obligation.
An obligation.
That sticks.
Yeah. According to the complaint, they further suggested that such action prepares sooner athletes for the real world. While the case has drawn little attention beyond the site of a site called College Fix, it raises serious issues for academia and free speech, as well as an intentional infliction of emotional distress claim against the Waltons. McLaughlin was on the Oklahoma University team captain and first team All Big Ten selection in 2018 and 2019. So it's obvious she's not a bad volleyball player. However, according to the Oklahoma University Daily, she drew the ire of fellow students after the team showed the Netflix documentary 13th, which is about slavery. McLaughlin reportedly said while she agreed 100% that slavery was wrong, she thought the film was slanted left. Whoa. Yeah.
How dare she?
Yeah. She also thought that the film went out of its way to criticize U.S. President Donald Trump. She also stated in response to another aspect of the film that, quote, black incarceration was higher than other racial groups while representing a smaller overall percentage of the population, which is what the race hustlers themselves are saying. That sounds like Brother Farrakhan or Jesse Jackson or guys like that, right? Later, McLaughlin objected on Twitter to the University of Texas move to drop its school song, The Eyes of Texas. And I always really like that song. I like all these Texas, Deep in the Heart of Texas, San Antonio Rose, The Eyes of Texas Are Upon You, right? And I haven't sat down and looked at the lyrics to see if I could spot what the objectionable part of that one is. Lindsay Walton urged her to delete the tweet and explained that I can't save you when you get into the real world when you leave here. Leaving here with all of these radical ideas.
Well, then stop coddling your players.
Kyle Walton was reportedly more direct and told her, quote, I'm not sure I can coach you anymore. In the end, McLaughlin apologized to the Texas volleyball players and its head coach for the tweet. However, the damage was done and McLaughlin was effectively declared persona non grata. She was reportedly given the option of transferring schools, etc. And here's a portion of the motion to dismiss. While plaintiff was free to make bigoted statements, like the ones I just read, she was not free from the consequences of how her teammates perceive those statements. The First Amendment cannot force her teammates to trust plaintiff or desire to play with her. Consequently, the complaint makes clear that Coach Walton was within her rights to cultivate a winning team atmosphere by ensuring the players that trust each other would be on the court. So in the name of creating a winning team, you can crap all over the First Amendment, right? Yeah. The implications of this argument are chilling. It would suggest that any unpopular athlete can be and should be excluded to cultivate a winning team. Notably, the Sooners ended this last season with a 4-14 record, but by God, they trusted each other.
Never was heard a disparaging word.
Yeah. There are a great number of reasons why a player could be unpopular. Indeed, this argument was once used against minority students to preserve cohesion or identity. In this case, McLaughlin was excluded not because of her athletic skills, which were obviously considerable, but her unpopular viewpoints. In a remarkable twist, the coaches argued that the lawsuit to protect free speech is itself a threat to free speech. They rely on Oklahoma's broad anti-SLAPP statute, which is meant to encourage and safeguard the constitutional rights of persons to petition, speak freely, associate freely, and otherwise participate in government to the maximum extent permitted by law, and at the same time protect the rights of a person to file meritorious lawsuits for demonstrable injury. By allegedly threatening and sanctioning as a student, the coaches allege they are protected under the law. The Board of Regents also filed a motion to dismiss, the Board of Regents of the University of Oklahoma. It's based primarily on the 11th Amendment claim of immunity. The university argues plaintiff's amended complaint amounts to nothing more than an inimical rant targeting several characters, parties and non-parties alike, for difficult conversations that followed the murder of George Floyd and nationwide discussions of social justice and inequality in America. Plaintiff states that she has been branded a racist and a homophobe by defendants. It was only after the complaint was filed that plaintiff received the attention complained of. In other words, plaintiff caused her own harm. Isn't that what we call blaming the victim? Yeah.
How this is like Twilight Zone stuff.
It is, and that's where we are. That's why I keep bringing this stuff up. You know, the whole world, at least the whole country, has gone nuts. The university also insists that there was no concrete harm committed on campus by the university. While the complaint's digressive nature espouses instances of roommates, teammates, and third-level hearsay, plaintiff can point to no conduct by the university or its officials in retaliation to on-campus free expression. Retaliation, like kicking her off the team. The two motions to dismiss clearly have some inherent conflict. The coaches are suggested that they could and should exclude some players due to unpopular beliefs, while the board is argument that there was no official retaliation for McLaughlin's viewpoints.
What?
Yeah. So you hold a mirror up to a mirror, and what do you see when you look in the mirror? The mirror. However, motions to dismiss often state extreme positions to show a lack of merit in a claim. Here the coaches are saying that even if they did what McLaughlin said, they would have been right to do so. On the torts question, it could be challenging to prove an intentional infliction of emotional distress. However, this will depend greatly on the discovery in the case. For a motion to dismiss, the court must assume the facts in favor of the non-moving party. In other words, in a motion to dismiss, the court gives the non-moving party the benefit of the doubt. That's about the only place you get it. In other words, defendant moves to dismiss plaintiff's complaint. The court says, we're treating everything that the plaintiff says in the complaint as true for the purposes of this motion. Thus, it could be difficult for the court to dismiss the case without allowing full discovery, absent a threshold jurisdictional or immunity defense raised like the one raised by the Board of Regents. So an immunity defense, the beauty of an immunity defense is that the litigant doesn't have to go through the arduous discovery process. Threshold jurisdiction is stuff like standing, ripeness, mootness, etc. And of course, we know that in order to have standing, the plaintiff must allege a real, concrete, current injury. Now, the standing requirements when it comes to speech and the First Amendment are not quite as stringent as they might be in some other cases, but I really want to read more about this case because universities have gone so far off the rails that I think that there ought to be a federal statute that said universities are henceforth prohibited from referring to themselves as institutions of higher learning, because it appears that nobody learns anything. Okay, it's time to head for the seventh inning stretch. And when I come back out of the seventh inning stretch in Wrigley Field, I want to talk to our Carl, who wants to talk about Weir and the question on democracy.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Hafare, this is Congressman Sir Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and situas mahase.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Okay, so here we are. I saw an interesting post here from Ismail Velez, going all the way back to the Wuhan virus. He says a whopping 26 service members have died of Wuhan in the past 18 months. Only 26, right? More recently, last week, 2 sailors died of Wuhan, but the Navy refused to divulge vaccination status. And according to our favorite judge, Senator, Marine, and talk show host, it isn't what they said, it's what they didn't say. Yeah. There were 96 soldiers and Army civilians recorded as mishap fatalities for the fiscal year 2020, less than the previous low of 109. Accidental deaths in 2016, the Army Combat Readiness Center annual safety report found. Of 96 deaths, 25 happened on duty. From 2006 to 2019, a total of 16,652 active duty personnel and mobilized reservists have died while serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. 73% of these casualties occurred under circumstances unrelated to war, the report states. The number of deaths by suicide among military service members increased alarmingly in the fourth quarter of 2020, according to the Defense Department's quarterly report. The military recorded 156 deaths by suicide among all services including active duty National Guard and Reserve troops from October 1 to December 31 last year. That's a 25% increase from the 125 such deaths that occurred in the last quarter of calendar 2019. For quarter one of 2021, the military service recorded the following: 76 in the active component, 13 in the reserves, 26 in the National Guard. The U.S. military, which is deployed around the country to assist with pandemic response, has struggled with Wuhan outbreaks, recording 163,574 cases and 26 deaths throughout the pandemic. That's a pretty low ratio. That's the entire population of Guam infected with only 26 deaths. That's a whopping 0.15% mortality rate, or a 99.985% survivability rate. Why the vaccine mandates for the military when they should be concentrating on the suicide rate? Interesting numbers, you know. In military, a lot of close contact, you know, people having to work closely together, et cetera. And only 26 died in an 18-month period when you figure out.
Of all the branches.
Of all the branches, yeah. Okay, let's go to the most dangerous man in the room. Yeah, well, who's in for a dangerous afternoon today, our Carl?
Yeah, I think one explanation for that low death rate among the military, I believe, is because their population has much less comorbidities. They don't accept people if they have, you know, obesity issues, probably a bunch of other things that are comorbidities. I don't know how they deal with diabetes or other things, which are comorbidities that affect survival. But I'm thinking that's why it's extremely low, because they tend to be more fit than the regular population.
Well, that's true for some of the branches, Carl.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, the Air Force is really loosened up. Now airmen can put their hands in their pockets when they're in uniform. You know what would happen to a Marine if he put his hand in his pocket? You know what Muslims do with thieves? It's about.
Oh no!
Go on with your story.
That's pretty strict.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also about that story about that young woman being forced off the team, basically from all the pressure for her stating some politically incorrect things. I think that's a classic example of why one scholar named Samuel Gregg, he labeled Antonio Gramsci, the Italian Marxist, I don't know if he's journalist or what exactly is
propagandist.
Propagandist, that's a good one. He labeled him the most dangerous socialist in history. And I'm no expert on Marxism-socialism-communism, but from what I know of it so far, I would put him up there. I would put Marx number one. I would put Lenin number two for Lenin's innovation of realizing that they needed to have full-time agitators, that they couldn't leave it to the masses to do this revolution. And I would put Gramsci number three. At this point, that may change later on, but I think those are the big three as of now. I had a suggestion regarding Neil Weir. Whenever you, I mentioned it to Jose. I said, whenever you have a Neil Weir story, you need to have Jose needs to have as his sound effect a snippet of Handel's Messiah.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
That sounds like something that Repeat would say. But go on.
I was inspired by Repeat's repeated comments about Mr. Weir having what do you call this? A savior complex.
Right. Yeah.
So I highly recommend that be the introductory music every time there's a Neil Weir piece.
I think maybe he has a seagull complex.
Seagull complex?
Yeah, he comes in, flaps his wings, squawks a lot, craps all over everything, and then flies away.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe you can have the sound of seagulls in the background.
Yeah. Pretty close.
I had one question I wanted to ask you. That's really the main reason why I wanted to call, because you were talking about democracy, and I've read, a fair amount, but I'm still confused about, democracy. It's been pointed out to me before that it's not mentioned a single time in the Constitution. It's pure democracy is really bad. I think the French Revolution is an example of that. But yet we're sometimes called a democracy. Yet we're sometimes called a constitutional republic. Sometimes we're called, I think, a federal republic. Can you kind of unconfuse me as to what exactly we are and why we're sometimes called a democracy and sometimes a constitutional republic, etc.?
I'll give it a shot, Carl, but the program's over at 6 o'clock. Well, democracy is an all-purpose word, and it's the one that the left uses. They brand anything they don't like as the anti-democratic or the end of our democracy, or like the legislation that some of the states are passing in to cure some of the problems we saw in the last election. This could be the end of our democracy. So we don't have a democracy. The only, as the Constitution was written, the only democratic part of our constitutional republic was the lower house, because members of the House of Representatives were elected by people in districts in each state. And the number of representatives the state had depended on the state's population compared to the national population. In the beginning, senators were chosen by state legislatures, not by the people. And we all know that as far as the president is concerned, you don't vote for president, you vote for electors, et cetera, et cetera. And it's the way we vote for president is an instance of our federal system. And as first of all conceived, the states acted acted with the people. The national government didn't have interplay with the citizens, except for one exception, the post office. Otherwise, citizens very seldom, if ever, dealt with the national government. So we had the democratically elected House. The Senate was not democratically elected. The President is not democratically elected. So we are a republic because it isn't like a New England town meeting where everybody goes to the meeting and everybody gets to vote. You vote for representatives, and the representatives make the decisions of government. I hope that helps you out, Carl.
That does. That helps to clarify it. I appreciate it, Bob. Thank you. That's why I like listening to Tall Tales. It's like what a college class should be.
Yeah, well, it's not like what college classes are like anymore, that's for sure.
No.
Yeah. And one other thing while we're talking about it, I have to explain one more time why I don't call the folks over in Washington the federal government. We don't have a federal government anymore. The word federal is an offshoot of federation, and we started out being, well, in the beginning, we were a federation of states under the Articles what's the term I'm looking for? The precursor to the U.S.
Declaration of Independence?
No, the Articles of... Carl, help me out here.
I think I vaguely...
the Continental Congress, that wasn't the U.S. Congress.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think it was the Articles of Confederation. So, it was a group of states acting together, but with no central authority. And we ditched that in the Constitutional Convention. We decided we'd have central authority that each of the 13 states would delegate some of its sovereignty to a central government that we call the federal government. And you find out what the powers of the federal government are by reading Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. I've done it more than once on the show. And those are the only things that the federal government was supposed to do. Everything else was left to the states. Well, now we've got the states getting involved in just about everything one way or another. I'm sorry, the national government getting involved in just about everything one way or another, setting speed limits and telling you what kind of light bulbs you're supposed to burn, and on and on and on. So we don't have a federal government anymore. We have a national government. It's as though we didn't have states. It's like the states are just administrative districts. And that's why I keep calling it a national government. I think you remember that, Carl.
Yes. So ideally, did the founders, they kind of envisioned the country as 13 initially, kind of loose-knit countries. Is that right?
Subordinate sovereigns, yeah. And there are a couple of theories on how government governs best. You know, one school is, well, we should consolidate. We should combine different units of government into one because it'll be more efficient. So in Europe, you know, instead of having 29 different sovereign independent countries, you know, with their own borders and their own laws, we should put them all together, and we'll call it the European Union. And then, well, yeah, you know, but if we really want to have peace, we should have something called the League of Nations. Second time around, let's call it the United Nations, because by pulling and that is wrong. That is the way to have a lot of conflict. The principle of subsidiarity is the other one, which means you bump every decision down to the lowest level of government that can handle it. So instead of the national government making the decisions, let the state government do it. And as much as possible, let that authority be exercised by cities, towns, and villages. They're closer to the people. It's more democratic. And frankly, it just works better. You don't have this idea, we've got to have secession, we've got to have separatism.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the genius of it, because in a national type government, if the central command and control government, like in a socialist country, is wrong, the entire country is wrong. But if the decision making is broken down to various states, some of them are going to make better decisions than others, but at least it won't be the entire country going down the drain.
Right you are, Carl.
Yeah.
Well, Carl,
thanks, Bob. I appreciate it.
Okay, I got to head for Churchill Downs. Good talking to you again. See you later.
Same here.
Yeah, I'm going to Churchill Downs, and when I get out, I'm going to find Mark S. Cruz no matter where he is.
Mezcla, read all about it. Check out Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tuman for lunch. Serving up some savory seafood specials such as spicy garlic shrimp, candied salmon, or better yet, the local favorite, snapper or shrimp escabeche. Available only during lunch hours. Make sure to come down and try these tasty specials and more. Call 969-2652 for more info or to make a reservation. Located at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tuman, Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. A true taste of Guam.
Looking for a seamless medical trip to Manila? St. Luke's Medical Center's Pacific Islands Medical Referral Package offers a convenient end-to-end medical travel service to St. Luke's Global City. With the package, they also provide assistance in the processing of your air travel requirements, airport to hospital transportation, and hospital room upgrades, all for free. To learn more, call Phil MD at 671-637-5433 or visit their office in Tamuning across the Baltej. At St. Luke's, we love life.
Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, heading down the home stretch of another another episode of Tall Tales. And Mark Cruz is going to make his mark here in the home stretch. Good afternoon, Mark.
Hi, Bob. So my question is about that Oklahoma Sooner case. When the two defendants put out their motion to dismiss, can that be used, since they both have conflicting motions, can that be used during the trial later?
Well, the motions will go before the judge, and the judge will decide on the motions. He'll write decisions ruling on the motions. And the motions really deal with matters of law rather than matters of fact. But the rulings on the motions will be part of what's called law of the case. And as each case goes along, the different rulings feed into what's called the law of the case. So, yeah, in that respect, yes.
So later on, after he rules on the motions, can they introduce the fact that the two coaches basically admitted that they did something wrong, and then that admission blows a hole in the university's case, saying that nobody from the university did anything wrong?
Yeah. Well, what happens quite often is motions to dismiss are decided. There's discovery, depositions, interrogatories, requests for production, requests for admissions, and then there will be a motion for summary judgment. Sometimes cross motions for summary judgment. And those conflicting arguments may very well be part of the decision on the motions for summary judgment, and the fact that they both can't win.
I'm curious as to how many of her teammates are actually going to say they were uncomfortable, or if it was just the coaches.
I suspect I know the answer. I'd speculate it's probably just the coaches, because his teammates probably didn't give a darn.
Okay. All right. Well, you know what? Like Carl said, it's like being back in college and having a really smart professor.
Well, thank you very much for your kind words, Mark. I was always glad to have you on the show.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. Have a good day. Bye.
So, that's a great caller.
Should have more of those.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I got about 12 minutes to go on the show here. I think I'm finally going to be able to start the Pope versus Bessieux. And this is about the Catholic Church. And I've mentioned this before, and that I want to zero in on the importance of the Catholic Church to everyone in the whole world, even non-Catholics. Maybe even especially non-Catholics. Because the word Catholic in that sense means universal. It's a church for everyone. And the idea, one of the underlying ideas is, well, at least it used to be, that there was something called salvation, that when a human being died, he had the opportunity to go to heaven if he had lived his life properly on earth. And the Catholic Church, being universal, was to look for the salvation of everyone. Correct, Jose?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And the Catholic Church, like any organization that's been in business for 2,000 years, under the operation of Homo sapiens, humans, has gone off the rails many times, has always gotten back on the rails, and it's always pretty much worked on that mission. So the Catholic Church has been a tremendous force for good over history. During the so-called Dark Ages, after the sacking of Rome, after the Roman Empire fell apart, the only real civilization, the only real government, the only real law in the whole wide world was the Catholic Church. It's what kind of held everything together. So I think it's easy to say, well, the church having a lot of problems. I don't care. I'm not Catholic. I belong to the Church of the next the Shell station down the street or whatever. So I don't care about this. But it's important to everyone because, in a sense, as a church goes, so goes the world. And the church is in big trouble right now. The church is run from an independent city-state called the Vatican, which is surrounded by Italy. It's 110 acres. I've walked all the way around it, by the way. Yeah. And perhaps the last absolute monarch in the world is the Pope. But he doesn't, I use the wrong word, he doesn't run the church everywhere. The principle of subsidiarity is embraced by the church. There are subunits called dioceses where the real power resides, and the real power in the church is with the bishops. Bishops are assigned to dioceses. There are cardinals, which is a rank and not necessarily a position. A cardinal can be in charge of a diocese. He can be a bishop in charge of a diocese. It's a rank. It's kind of like Monsignor versus priest. Okay, so there is a cardinal named Becciu, B-E-C-C-I-U, who has committed some misconduct. And everyone is watching how this pope will deal with the misconduct. We've been through this before on a local basis when Cardinal Burke found Bishop Apparound guilty, and he appealed to the Vatican, and the Pope took the case himself instead of letting the appellate organ at the Vatican deal with it, and ultimately sustained the finding of Cardinal Burke. Perhaps, maybe it was just a coincidence, but at the same time that the cardinal from the United States was found guilty. All right, so let me get into this article. The trial of Cardinal Becciu could destroy the reputation of the Holy See, what's left of it. The most corrupt nation-state in Europe occupies only 120 acres of land, and it has fewer than 1,000 residents. But its capacity for initiating criminal behavior and the global consequences of the financial and sexual scandals in which it's entangled are hugely out of proportion to its size. That's because around the world, roughly 1 billion people traditionally regard the state's geriatric absolute monarch as God's representative on earth. They may have been aware that for centuries a few bad apples in the administration have betrayed the monarch's trust by embezzling money. But the notion that the whole state was slowly turning into a criminal enterprise would have struck them as ridiculous, even sacrilegious, of course. We're talking about the Vatican City, of course. Visitors to Rome are often skeptical of the notion that this walled enclave behind St. Peter's, less than half the size of Hyde Park, and this is a British website, by the way, called Unheard, written by a guy named Damian Thompson. Less than half the size of Hyde Park is really an independent country. They shouldn't be. If you've ever stayed there, as I have, you're left in no doubt that when the Swiss guards wave you through, you're stepping beyond the reach of the Italian Republic. It's essentially true at night when your footsteps echo in the desolate courtyards. The Vatican has its own legal system, criminal investigators, gendarmerie, and jail cell. I hope I pronounced that wrong. Gendarmerie. I hope Frenchie's listening. And jail cells. And it doesn't hesitate to use them when Pope Benedict XVI butler Paolo Gabriele was sentenced to jail for aggravated theft in 2012. He served his time in a cell in the Vatican police barracks. That was a significant conviction. Gabriele had leaked documents alleging bribery and blackmail affecting the Pope's closest advisors. The resulting VatiLeaks scandal is suspected to have inspired Benedict's decision to resign the papal office in despair in 2013. The cells were occupied again in 2016 when Monsignor Lucio Balda, a high-ranking financial official, served several months there after being convicted of leaking confidential documents to journalists who claimed that the Vatican was engaged in massive property fraud. At the time of Balda's arrest, the international press settled on a clear narrative. The VatiLeaks scandal shows the scale of the challenge facing Pope Francis as he set about cleaning up the finances of the Holy See. Benedict was weak and craven, his successor fearlessly committed to reform. Can I have some dramatic music for that, Jose? Benedict was weak and craven, his successor fearlessly committed to reform.
One? No.
Triumphant music.
Oh.
No? Let me go on. The narrative, or at least the part relating to Francis, was soon torn to shreds by events, though the left-leaning Vatican press corps, utterly smitten by the Argentinian pontiff, was reluctant to draw the appropriate conclusions. So we've seen that before, haven't we? On 18 June 2017, Vatican gendarmes raided the office of Libero Miloni, former CEO of Deloitte. Yeah, Deloitte in Italy, who had been appointed the Vatican's first Auditor General at the instigation of Cardinal George Pell, an Australian prelate whom Francis put in charge of reforming finances. The Oxford-educated Pell had the reputation of a bruiser who specialized in detecting, I can't use the word here, I'm going to have to use my substitute word for it, bovine excrement. Male bovine.
Malarkey.
Male bovine excrement. This is not Joe Biden. His appointment was greeted with queasy alarm by the Vatican's old guard. When they appointed Pell, they all thought, uh-oh, the shucks is going to hit the fan. At the time of the raid, however, Pell was preparing to return to Australia to face what turned out to be completely false charges of molesting 2 boys in his Melbourne cathedral in the 90s. He was convicted of the offense at a retrial and was imprisoned until April 2020, when Australia's High Court threw out the charges and acquitted him. Now, we'll pick this back up tomorrow. This is pretty interesting stuff. Okay, so tomorrow is our least favorite day of the week, so we're going to be tough tomorrow. We're going to have the best show of the week, so don't miss it. See you then.
Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Reading and writing and roll up your sleeve. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. California ordering all its school employees to be corona vaccinated.
The vaccine requirement in California goes beyond just teachers. It requires all staff. That includes bus drivers, custodians, really anyone having contact with children in K through 12 schools in the state of California. Employees who are unable or unwilling to get vaccinated will be required to undergo routine testing for COVID. California is the first state to impose such a requirement in schools.
Fox's Jonathan Seri. Oregon residents have been ordered to wear face masks indoors, in public again.
Without safety measures, we could be as many as 500 staffed hospital beds short of what we need to treat patients by September.
It's Governor Kate Brown, who says intensive care units around the state are at 90% capacity. Late word from Afghanistan.